Let me ask you something. How do you handle a sudden string of financial anomalies without jumping straight to the worst possible conclusion? It's one of the toughest challenges in corporate investigations and digital forensics. Today, we're diving into exactly how professionals manage raw data without letting their instincts take over.
So imagine this. You find a discrepancy. Then you find another one. And then a third. Suddenly, the story feels incredibly obvious, right? Well, stop right there. That is actually the single most dangerous moment in any investigation. You found a pattern of anomalies, sure, but does that make you the prosecutor? This moment is dangerous, not because you have too little evidence, but because your brain tricks you into believing you finally have enough.
To recalibrate how we process all this raw data, we need a structured method. So here's our roadmap for today. 1. The danger of patterns. 2. The anatomy of a discrepancy. 3. The 3 roles you must separate. 4. The investigative boundary test. And 5. Precision and preserved evidence. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The danger of patterns. The story your brain wants to finish.
Think about a situation where a basic spreadsheet directly contradicts an official report. Now, individually, a single anomaly usually has a pretty simple, innocent explanation. But when you put them together, they tempt us to build a neat, conclusive narrative around our very first impressions. Take a look at this. We have an internal sales report showing a substantially higher figure compared to an official financial document for that exact same year, which shows a much lower figure. An amateur looks at that and instantly declares they're concealing revenue. And hey, maybe they are. But that is a conclusion. It is not an observation.
Before you can even think about reaching a conclusion like that, you have to ask some pretty rigorous questions. Are we even looking at the exact same legal entity? Are they measuring the same reporting period? Is one figure gross and the other net? Does either document include taxes, internal transfers, or maybe duplicate entries? Were refunds treated consistently across both? Is that internal file contemporaneous, or was it reconstructed weeks later? And finally, can its provenance and integrity actually be demonstrated? If you haven't answered every single one of those questions, you've merely identified an observable discrepancy. You haven't established its actual cause.
Which brings us to the core evidentiary problem, captured perfectly right here. A pattern changes the standard of review. It does not deliver the verdict. Finding a pattern absolutely increases the need for serious scrutiny, but it does not automatically establish who designed it, who understood it, if it was intentional, if every record is authentic, or if any laws were actually broken.
Moving to Section 2. 3 roles you must separate. Avoiding the cognitive trap of collapsing functions.
Here is a hard truth. When one person tries to discover the evidence, test the legal theories, and determine the consequences all by themselves, confirmation bias takes the wheel. Evidence morphs into advocacy. Advocacy starts sounding like absolute certainty, and certainty travels a whole lot faster than verification. A genuinely disciplined investigation separates these 3 very distinct functions. First, you have the investigator. Their job is strictly to collect, preserve, and compare evidence. They just ask what happened and what do the records actually show. Second is the prosecutorial or regulatory authority. They're the ones who decide if that evidence supports a formal legal theory, and they have the power to compel testimony. Finally, the court or the authorized decision-maker. That's the institution legally empowered to evaluate the evidence and hand down consequences. If you are the investigator, your boundary stops firmly at step 1.
Section 3. Anatomy of a discrepancy. What a record proves and what it doesn't.
Let's break this down and meticulously stratify our layers of evidence using a common technical fact. Let's say a specific username appears in a system event log just after midnight. Now, this event definitively establishes 3 observable artifacts. 1. A specific account was used. 2. The system recorded activity at a particular time. And 3. The event originated from a particular session or device.
But we have to contrast those hard facts with analytical inferences and unresolved hypotheses. Look at what that exact same event does not establish. It does not establish who was physically sitting at the keyboard operating the device. It doesn't prove if those credentials were shared or stolen. It doesn't tell us if the event was just an automated script. It doesn't reveal the human intent behind the activity. And it doesn't even prove if the system's timestamp was correctly synchronized in the first place. A log itself cannot prove human identity or intent. Precision is incredibly valuable, but precision is not the same thing as automatic truth.
Section 4. The investigative boundary test. 5 questions to ask before going public.
So how do we prevent a compelling pattern from snowballing into an unfounded accusation?
You run your analysis through a sequential boundary test. Number 1, what have I directly established? Here, you describe only what the records demonstrate. Zero interpretation allowed. Number 2, what remains unresolved? Listen, listing your missing information out in the open is a strength. It's not a weakness. Number 3, have I tested the strongest innocent explanation? You have to ask yourself what a highly competent opposing reviewer would say about your findings. Number 4, are my sources genuinely independent? And number 5, who has the authority to take the next step? Because remember, your role is to preserve evidence and document the discrepancy. It is not to automatically declare someone guilty.
Let's zero in on step 4 for a second, because there's a massive difference between independent verification and mere duplication. Just because you see something on 10 different dashboards doesn't mean you have 10 sources. Repetition is not corroboration. 3 different spreadsheets could easily have been generated from the exact same flawed original export. Agreement between sources is only useful if those sources are genuinely, operationally independent.
And this logic holds exceptionally true when we talk about artificial intelligence. Yes, AI is amazing at extracting dates, comparing massive documents, and building complex timelines. But it cannot inherit legal authority, it cannot determine if a source document is truly authentic, and it certainly cannot conclude what a human being actually intended. Running the exact same raw data through 5 different AI models doesn't give you 5 independent witnesses, it just gives you 5 statistical analyses of the exact same data set. AI is great for accelerating scrutiny, but it absolutely cannot replace human judgment or establish legal reality.
Section 5, Precision and Preserved Evidence, the discipline of calibrated language.
A credible investigator uses calibrated language, not to weaken a finding, but to make it legally defensible and much harder to dismiss. You want to implement these 3 terminology shifts right away. First, never write, "This proves fraud." That's amateur. Instead, use the defensible version, "This recurring discrepancy warrants independent examination." Second, instead of throwing around the accusatory phrase, "They falsified the records," state calmly, "The records reviewed do not currently reconcile." And finally, instead of claiming, "This account proves who performed it," calibrate that to, "The account identifier establishes digital activity, but does not independently identify the human operator."
In fact, you should give your professional reporting this exact structured framework. It perfectly separates facts from unproven inferences, and it outlines proportionate recommendations. Here's the formula. The available evidence establishes X. It does not independently establish Y. It justifies Z. So for example, the available records establish recurring differences. They do not independently establish intent. They justify a formal review using original records. Let me be clear, that is not timid language, that is ironclad defensible language.
Which brings us to our final thought. You've found a pattern. The real question is, are you protecting it from your own certainty? The strongest investigator in the room is never the loudest accuser. The strongest investigator is the one who knows their exact boundaries. It's the professional who can clearly articulate what the evidence establishes, what it cannot establish, what remains unresolved, and what precisely needs to happen next. Handing off your findings to a competent authority isn't a failure. It is the core of the method. You gain profound credibility by refusing to overstate your work.
Take patterns seriously. Preserve them. Test them. Escalate them responsibly. But never confuse discovery with judgment. Simvonsky Labs and Research. Forensics over fiction.